We arrived at my dacha, and my husband's sister immediately divided up the groceries. My kids are special, they get the meat. Yours will manage, she declared. My husband pretended it was perfectly normal. I silently watched as they grilled the meat. But when they took it off the barbecue and carried it to the table, what they saw on the plates made them turn green. The May sun poured generously into the kitchen, casting reflections on the glossy surface of the new mixer. Leslie lovingly packed marinated chicken, homemade cutlets, and fresh vegetables into containers. Ahead of her were 2 days at her own dacha, a little paradise inherited from her parents. The air smelled of pine and last year's leaves. The old creaky hammock still remembered her childhood, and the evenings were filled with silence, broken only by the chirping of cicadas. "Mom, are we taking the tent?" Peered into the kitchen 10-year-old Roger, her serious and thoughtful son. "Of course," Leslie smiled. "We'll set it up in the backyard. You and Ashley can make your little base there." 7-year-old Ashley immediately ran after him, clutching a plush bunny and a flashlight. "We'll take the flashlight so we're not scared at night." Leslie hugged the children. She lived for these moments, for their delighted eyes, for the smell of their hair, for the chance to give them the same happy, carefree childhood she had had at this dacha. Lately, she had been very tired. Working as a home pastry chef demanded immense dedication. Right now, cake layers for a complex wedding cake, due on Monday, were waiting in the fridge. But she had decided to dedicate these 2 days solely to her family. The phone rang in the hallway. It was Dave, her husband. "Leslie, hi. Are you ready yet? Listen, here's the thing." He hesitated. Leslie tensed immediately. That pause never boded well. "Well, I was talking to Betty. Their weekend plans got canceled. I thought, why should they sit in the stuffy city? I invited them to our dacha." Blood slowly drained from Leslie's face. Betty, her sister-in-law, Dave's older sister. The woman whose visits made Leslie feel like she needed to do a deep cleaning not only of the house but of her own soul. "Dave, we agreed to spend the weekend just the 4 of us. Come on, Archie, don't start." His voice took on those pleading notes she hated. "What's the big deal? There's plenty of space. The kids will have more fun together. And Betty promised to make meat. You know how she cooks it." Leslie knew. She knew Betty would bring 2 kilograms of the most expensive meat and then spend the evening telling everyone how hard it was these days to find quality products. She knew she would bring her children, Lucas and Nancy, and compare their achievements to Roger's and Ashley's more modest ones. She knew that Dave, her husband and support, would turn into a little brother again, hanging on his sister's every word and agreeing with everything she said. "I already bought everything, Dave. I was counting only on us." "Great. So the table will be even richer." He pretended not to notice the chill in her voice. "Don't argue. They're on their way. See you there. Kisses." Short beeps. He didn't even give her a chance to object. Leslie let her hands fall. Her mood was ruined. The anticipation of a quiet family weekend collapsed like a house of cards. She looked at the containers of food. Everything now seemed so inadequate, wrong. As if she had been preparing for a cozy candlelit dinner, only to be told that a noisy inspection team was coming. She remembered their last meeting 6 months ago at Dave's birthday. Betty had given him an expensive watch, loudly announcing to the whole company, "At least my brother should have something classy, since his wife won't let him earn a premium car." Dave had smiled awkwardly, while Leslie wished she could disappear through the floor. Her gift, a certificate for an extreme driving course he had dreamed of, paled in comparison to the shining watch face. "Mom, what's wrong?" Roger touched her hand. "Are you sad?" "No, sweetheart," she forced a smile. "Just thinking. Aunt Betty is coming to visit, with Lucas and Nancy. Roger frowned. Again? Lucas will say his tablet is better than mine. Leslie stayed silent. She didn't know what to tell her son. She only knew that this weekend would be another test of her patience. And somewhere deep inside, a faint, almost subconscious thought stirred, what if this time I don't manage? But she immediately pushed it away. She was a non-confrontational person. She always tried to smooth out rough edges. That's how her mother had taught her. But Leslie didn't yet know that every patience has its limit, and hers was very close. The drive to the dacha took just over an hour. The old but reliable car glided smoothly along the country road. The children in the back seat were noisy at first, then, lulled by the steady motion, they dozed off. Leslie watched the fields and groves rushing past and tried to recapture the joyful anticipation she had felt that morning. But anxiety wrapped her thoughts in a sticky web. When they approached the village, Leslie saw from a distance at the gate of her dacha a shiny black crossover. Carl, Betty's husband, was already there. They had arrived. Her heart clenched unpleasantly. Not only had they come, but they had arrived first, as if to assert their right to be the main guests. Dave and Betty stood on the porch. Her sister-in-law was dressed as if she were attending the opening of a fashion exhibition rather than a countryside getaway: snow-white linen trousers, a bright silk blouse, massive gold jewelry. Seeing Leslie's car, she didn't move from her spot, only waved condescendingly. Finally. We thought you'd gotten lost among the 3 pines. Lucas, Nancy, go say hello to your cousins. Leslie turned off the engine and got out of the car. Dave came over and awkwardly kissed her on the cheek. Good, you made it. We're just getting settled here. They were getting settled in their own peculiar way. An old garden table already held a bottle of expensive wine and glasses. Betty's husband, Carl, a quiet man who always stayed in the shadow of his assertive wife, nodded to Leslie and then returned to staring at his phone. Hi, Leslie approached her sister-in-law. Hi. Betty gave her a critical once-over from head to toe. What are you wearing? Jeans? Well, yes, that's fine for the garden. Leslie ignored the jab. She was used to it. Where did you settle in? We took the bedroom on the 2nd floor, the one with the balcony, Betty stated as if it were self-evident. The view is better, and the kids will have more space. You can manage downstairs in the smaller room. Leslie froze. The balcony bedroom was her favorite. It had remained the same as it had been under her parents: an old carved bed, a dressing table with a yellowed mirror, curtains embroidered by her mother. It wasn't just a guest room, it was a corner of her soul. We usually sleep there, she said softly. Well, tonight you'll sleep somewhere else, Betty cut her off. Really? Is it too much to give the best room to your brother and his sister? We are guests, after all. Leslie looked at Dave, seeking support. Betty, really, Leslie loves that room, he began weakly. Dave, don't start, his sister interrupted. We're already settled, unpacked our things. We're not going to move everything now. Leslie isn't selfish, right? She understands guests should get the best. Leslie looked at her husband. He shrugged apologetically, as if to say, what can I do? She fell silent again, clenched her teeth, and began unpacking the groceries. In the kitchen, another surprise awaited her. Betty had apparently already conducted an inspection. I see you bought sausages, she said, holding a pack with distaste. And these cheap macaroni. Leslie, we're not in a student dormitory. Couldn't you buy something decent? I bought food for us, Betty. I didn't know you were coming. But now. Her sister-in-law dramatically threw the pack of sausages onto the table. Good thing I played it safe. She opened the trunk of her car and began pulling out bags from a high-end supermarket, packs of marbled beef, fresh asparagus, artichokes, blue cheeses, jars of olives, and sun-dried tomatoes. Everything was displayed on the kitchen table with exaggerated ceremony: creating a stark contrast with Leslie's simple groceries. Leslie felt her blood boil. This wasn't just food, it was a display of status, of superiority. Look how we live and how you live. Dave, help your sister. Betty shouted from the window. Dave immediately ran over, inspecting the purchases with admiration. Wow, Betty, you really prepared. Pork neck, just how I like it. The steaks will be amazing. He said it with such genuine, childlike enthusiasm that Leslie felt a pang of pain. He didn't even notice how humiliating the whole situation looked. While the adults unpacked the bags, the children met in the yard. Roger and Ashley approached their cousins. Lucas, a tall, thin 11-year-old, looked them over disdainfully. Why did you come? Mom said it would be boring here. No decent internet. But there's a forest and a river, Roger replied. And we can set up a tent. A tent? Snorted 8-year-old Nancy, a spitting image of her mother. Ew, there'll be mosquitoes. At our grandfather's dacha, there's a heated pool. Leslie's children fell silent, embarrassed. They always faltered in the face of such force and arrogance. Watching from the kitchen window, Leslie felt a lump rise in her throat. Her children at her own dacha, and they already felt like outsiders, misplaced, second-rate people. At that moment, her phone vibrated. A message from the cake client. Leslie, hello. I was thinking, could we replace the raspberry mousse in the filling with pistachio? And maybe make the roses not cream-colored but soft blue? Awaiting your reply. Leslie closed her eyes. Blue roses. Pistachio mousse. That meant the entire filling preparation would have to be thrown out and started from scratch. And she still had to find food coloring in the right shade somewhere. She set the phone on the table. Problems were piling up from all sides: a dictatorial sister-in-law, a betraying husband, a capricious client. She felt trapped and for now, saw no way out. She only knew one thing: it couldn't continue like this. Something had to happen. Something had to break. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in soft peach tones. The air was filled with the scent of blooming bird cherry and the smoke from the glowing coals in the grill. Carl, Betty's husband, silently and methodically stoked the fire while Dave fussed around, handing him either the starter or a fan made of plywood. Leslie finished chopping vegetables for the salad and stepped onto the veranda. The children were playing on the lawn. Or rather, Lucas and Nancy were playing. With solemn expressions, they were building something from an expensive construction set they had brought along. Roger and Ashley sat a little apart on the old swings, whispering quietly to each other. The boundary between the groups was invisible, yet almost tangible. Betty came out of the house carrying a large enamel bucket, in which the marinated meat glowed appetizingly red. All right, gentlemen, the fire is ready, she commanded. Time to begin the sacred ritual. She set the bucket on the table and began skewering the meat. She did it with the air of a priestess performing an important rite. Each piece was carefully chosen, inspected from all sides, and neatly threaded onto the metal skewer. Leslie approached the table with a bowl of chopped cucumbers and tomatoes. I made a salad, she said. Put it there, Betty waved vaguely, not looking up from her task. But don't add the mayonnaise yet. Leslie had brought her own light, olive oil-based, not that calorie-laden stuff Betty preferred. She quietly set the bowl down. She no longer tried to argue or take offense. She simply observed, feeling like an audience member in the front row of an absurdist play. When the first batch of skewers was ready, Betty called her children over. Lucas, Nancy, come here, help your mom. She handed them each a skewer and began explaining how to turn the meat so it wouldn't burn. Leslie's children watched curiously from the side. Mom, can we have some too? Ashley asked softly, approaching Leslie. Of course, sweetheart, Leslie nodded, about to pick up a couple of skewers. But Betty anticipated her. Wait. Let's sort out the food first. She wiped her hands with a paper towel and approached the table, where all the food was laid out in containers and bags. All right, let's see, she began loudly, so everyone, including the children, could hear. This, she pointed to the bucket of steaks, is pork neck. Tender, diet-friendly meat. This is for mine. Lucas does sports, he needs protein. Nancy is a ballerina, she can't have anything fatty either. Then she picked up the pack of sausages Leslie had brought. And these are sausages. Even reading the ingredients is scary, just soy and chemicals. Well, since you bought them, can't throw them away. She looked pointedly at Roger and Ashley. You'll get them. Leslie's heart skipped a beat. She couldn't believe her ears. What are you saying, Betty? She asked quietly. Saying it like it is, her sister-in-law replied calmly. I take care of my children's health. They don't eat just anything. That's why they get the meat. And yours, I think, will be happy with the sausages. They're kids, not picky. And these macaroni, she pointed at the pack, you can cook them. They'll be fine. A heavy, ringing silence followed. Carl froze with the fan in his hand. The children stopped playing. Everyone stared at Betty, standing like a general announcing the battle plan. Leslie looked at Dave. She expected him to flare up, to object, to put his sister in her place, to say that his children wouldn't eat scraps, that this was humiliating and absurd. But Dave tried to smile. Betty, come on, he approached and gave his sister a friendly nudge in the shoulder. Just like in the army, hazing. Let's not do that. There's enough for everyone. I'm not joking, Dave, Betty replied coldly, brushing his hand off. I will not let my children eat this junk. We agreed, we bring quality products. That's what we'll eat. What Leslie brought, that's her choice, how to feed her family. Ashley's face twisted, she was on the verge of tears. Roger, on the contrary, clenched his fists. His face went pale, and he looked at his father with such open contempt that Leslie felt a pang of fear. Dave. Her voice was barely audible. Say something. Archie, really, maybe we shouldn't argue over food? He looked at her pleadingly. Betty doesn't mean any harm. She's just... Well, you know, she's obsessed with healthy eating. This isn't healthy eating, Dave. This is humiliation. Leslie almost shouted. She's dividing our children into first and second class. Can't you see that? Come on, what's second class? He waved it off. Kids like sausages. Mine love them. Right, Roger? Roger didn't answer. He silently turned and walked into the house. Ashley ran after him, no longer holding back her tears. Leslie remained standing alone in the yard. Her husband, her protector, had just publicly betrayed her and their children. He hadn't just failed to defend them, he had practically agreed with this monstrous division. He acted as if it were normal. There, it's decided, Betty said with satisfaction, returning to her meat. Carl, bring it to the grill before it gets dark. Leslie looked at her smug face, at her husband's bewildered expression, at silent Carl, and realized the point of no return had been crossed. Tonight, she was supposed to be making a wedding cake, but instead she would have to clean up the ruins of her own family. She slowly walked into the house. Inside, it was cold despite the warm May evening. She knew something had to be done. But what? Start a fight? Pack up and leave? It all seemed so predictable and useless. No, the answer had to be different, unequal, something that would make them remember this meat for the rest of their lives. Leslie found the children in their small room on the first floor. Ashley was crying into her pillow, while Roger sat on the bed staring at a single point. His face was stern, almost adult-like. "It's okay, my dears." Leslie sat down beside them and hugged them. "Don't cry. Aunt Betty is just not a very smart woman. Dad." He didn't say anything, Roger muttered without looking at her. He heard what she said and stayed silent. "Dad just doesn't like to argue," Leslie said, though the words caught in her throat. "How do I explain to my son that his father is a coward? How do I justify this betrayal?" She sat with them until Ashley stopped crying and Roger thawed a little. She told them stories from her childhood, how she and her grandfather built a fort on an old apple tree, how they flew a kite that got stuck in the tallest pine. She spoke, but all she thought about was what to do. Half an hour later, Dave called her onto the porch. He stood there, awkwardly shifting from foot to foot. "Why are you locked up in there?" he asked, with a hint of offense in his voice. "You upset the kids. They came out, and they don't even greet me. Did you expect them to throw themselves at you after you let them be humiliated?" Leslie crossed her arms. "No one humiliated them." He began to get worked up. "Stop dramatizing. So Betty said something about sausages. What of it?" "Big deal. She's always been sharp-tongued, you know that. I know she's cruel and jealous. But I thought you were my husband. That you were on my side. On our children's side. I am on your side," he exclaimed. "But I don't want to ruin my relationship with my sister over a piece of meat. She's my only sister, Leslie. We grew up together. She's always helped me. I can't just tell her off. But us, then, we're fair game?" Her voice trembled. "We can be humiliated, insulted, and you can't risk spoiling your relationship with your sister? That's different." He spread his hands helplessly. "She's leaving tomorrow, and it will all be forgotten. Just endure one evening. What's the harm? Why make a scene for no reason? Be wiser. Be wiser." That phrase had been his shield in all conflicts with Betty. It meant, stay silent, give in, erase yourself, become invisible. And she had always done so. But today something inside her broke. "No, Dave," she said quietly but firmly. "This time I will not be wiser. I will not let my children be treated as second-class people." "And what are you going to do?" he challenged. "Throw a tantrum? Smash some plates?" "I haven't decided yet," Leslie answered honestly. "But I do know one thing, it won't be your way." She turned and went to the kitchen. She needed to do something, keep her hands busy so she wouldn't lose control. She took out potatoes, onions, mushrooms she had brought with her. While they were outside preparing their elite feast, she would make dinner for her children. A normal, delicious dinner. She peeled potatoes, her mind replaying their conversation. She's his only sister. And me? His wife. Mother of his children. So, in his value system, we come somewhere far behind his sister. She remembered their wedding 5 years ago. Betty had been the maid of honor. She gave a toast mentioning 10 times how she had raised her little brother, only adding at the end something like, "I hope this girl won't disappoint you." Even then, it was a warning bell, but Leslie, blinded by love, paid it no mind. Then came years of small and large humiliations. Betty criticized her appearance, her cooking skills, her parenting methods. "Why doesn't Roger read yet?" My Lucas at his age was already quoting Shakespeare in the original. In reality, Lucas was barely keeping up with the alphabet. "Leslie, that dress makes you look fat. You need to wear something more high status. Dave, you've lost so much weight. Is your wife not feeding you at all?" And every time, Dave either stayed silent or turned it into a joke. Not once, in all these years, did he ever tell his sister, "Enough. She's my wife, and I won't let you talk to her like that." Leslie chopped onions, tears streaming down her cheeks. not from the onion, or maybe partly from bitter thoughts. Her husband's betrayal hurt far more than her sister-in-law's audacity. Betty was a stranger to her. Anything could be expected from her. But Dave, he was supposed to be her other half. At least, that's what she had thought. And it turned out that this half was completely rotten with fear of his older sister. Ashley peeked into the kitchen. "Mom, what are you making?" "Potatoes, fried with mushrooms." "Your favorite. Aren't we having meat?" The girl asked hopefully. "We're going to have a dinner better than any steak," Leslie promised, wiping her tears. "Go get Roger, let's set the table. Here, in the kitchen, we'll have our little, but very honest, dinner." She took an old checkered tablecloth from the cupboard, the very one her mother used to lay, and set the plates. The aroma of fried potatoes and mushrooms filled the small kitchen. It smelled like home, comfort, safety. Everything that was so missing on the veranda, where the first-class feast was already in full swing. Leslie looked out the window. Betty, Dave, Carl, and their children sat at a large table. Steaks, fresh vegetables, and expensive appetizers were spread before them. They laughed, clinked wine glasses. Dave was talking animatedly, gesturing. He looked happy. Happy there, with them. Without her. Without their children. At that moment, Leslie felt her hurt and pain turn into cold, calm determination. She knew what she had to do. She wouldn't shout or smash dishes. She would respond in their own style, quietly, elegantly, and humiliatingly. Enough to reach even the special ones. Dinner in the kitchen passed in near silence. The children ate their potatoes, trying not to look toward the veranda, from where Betty's loud laughter and clinking glasses echoed. Leslie saw her son Roger clenching his fork in his fist, and Ashley's lips trembling. They understood everything. Children feel injustice more sharply than adults because their souls are not yet shielded by the protective shell of cynicism. After dinner, Leslie had them draw while she started preparing her main project, the wedding cake. She took the sponge layers, cream, and decoration pieces from the fridge. Working calmed her, allowed her to focus. Each brush of cream, each sugar flower she shaped was meditation. But today, her hands would not obey. Her thoughts kept returning to what had happened in the yard. She could hear Betty loudly praising the meat Carl had prepared. "Now this is a man's hand. The meat melts in your mouth. Not like your little chicken patties." Dave chimed in. "Yes, Betty, Carl's a master. I'll have to get his marinade recipe." Leslie squeezed the piping bag hard, and an ugly blob of cream squirted onto the sponge. She cursed and scraped it off with a spatula. At some point, Dave came into the kitchen. He was slightly drunk, his cheeks flushed. "Why are you sitting here in the heat? Come join us, it's fun." "Betty's telling jokes." "I'm working, Dave. I have a cake due Monday. And this cake, by the way, will pay our next mortgage installment." "Oh, come on with your work." He waved her off. "One evening we can relax. We're a family, we should be together." "Family?" She looked up at him. "Is that the family that's sitting on the veranda eating meat while your children eat potatoes?" He grimaced. "Here you go again. I asked you not to make a mountain out of a molehill." "So they had meat, what's the problem?" "Tomorrow we'll cook your chicken. There'll be enough for everyone." He went to the fridge and took out a beer. "You know," he said, opening it, "sometimes you're so difficult. Always dissatisfied with everything. Always looking for problems. Betty's right, you need to be simpler." He left, leaving Leslie alone with that phrase, "Betty's right." So they had already been discussing her. Sitting there happy and full, they were talking about her behind her back. And her husband, instead of defending her, agreed with his sister. The pressure mounted. She felt besieged. On one side, her sister-in-law with her poisonous jabs. On the other, her husband, turned into a shadow of his sister. And on the third, her demanding client, who just sent another message. Leslie, don't forget that the top tier should have the couple's initials and edible pearls. Please send a photo of how it will look. Leslie buried her head in her hands. Edible pearls. She was sitting at the old country house, in the epicenter of a family scandal, and she had to think about edible pearls. It was so surreal she wanted to laugh. She forced herself to pick up the tablet and started looking for decoration references. She had to distract herself, or she would go insane. After a while, Roger peeked into the kitchen. "Mom," he said softly, "Aunt Betty told me to go chop firewood for the sauna." "What?" Leslie tore her eyes away from the tablet. "Why?" She said a man should do man's work, not sit in the kitchen with Mom. Leslie jumped up. This was too much. Sending a 10-year-old child, who had never even held an axe in his life, to chop firewood. She stormed onto the veranda. Betty was lounging in a deck chair with a glass of wine, lazily flipping through a magazine. "Betty, are you out of your mind?" Leslie tried to keep her voice calm, but it trembled with anger. "What sauna? What firewood? Roger is 10 years old. So what?" Betty lazily lifted her eyes. My Lucas was already helping his father in the garage at that age. A boy needs to learn to work, not be raised as a delicate little thing. He could get hurt. It's dangerous. "Oh, stop dramatizing," Betty snorted. "The axe is small, a camping one. What could happen? At least he'll be busy doing something." Leslie looked at Dave. He sat next to his sister, pretending to be deeply engrossed in a conversation with Carl. He had heard everything and stayed silent again. "Roger, go inside," Leslie said firmly to her son. "You are not chopping anything." "There you go again," Betty drawled. "You always ruin everything. I was trying to do something good, get the kid involved in useful work, and you make it a tragedy. No wonder your kids are growing up so childish." Leslie said nothing more. She took her son by the hand and led him inside. She realized words were powerless here. Any attempt to defend herself or her children would be labeled a tantrum, a refusal to cooperate. She put the children to bed and read them a story. When she returned to the kitchen, fairy lights were already lit on the veranda. The group was having fun. Loud music played from a portable speaker Betty had brought. They felt like masters of their world. Leslie sat down at her cake. Now she worked with a cold, clear head. The plan had formed. It was bold, risky, but the only right choice. She took a small bag from her purse, which she always carried to the country house. Inside was cat food, cheap, wet, and jelly, with a sharp, choking fishy smell. She bought it for a local stray cat that sometimes came to their porch. The cat was her only grateful companion in this hostile world. Today, its treat would serve another purpose. A purpose of justice. She waited. Waited for the right moment, when they would all be distracted. And she knew that moment would come soon. It was close to 10 o'clock. The music on the veranda had grown louder, the conversations more incoherent. Dave and Carl were already quite drunk and now heatedly arguing about football. Betty, slightly swaying, went inside for another bottle of wine. This was the moment Leslie had been waiting for. She went out from the other side of the house, circled around it along the dark path, and reached the barbecue. There, on the grill, the last batch of steaks was cooling. All the rest had already been eaten. Leslie glanced at the first-class table, scraps, dirty plates, empty bottles. The feast had succeeded. Next to the grill, on a small table, was a large plate where Carl was placing the cooked meat. Leslie quickly pulled the small packet of cat food from her pocket. Her hands trembled slightly, but she acted quickly and decisively. She didn't ruin the meat. That would be too simple and too risky. They could accuse her of attempted poisoning. Her plan was subtler. She carefully picked a few pieces of jelly from the packet with her fingertips and spread it in a thin, almost invisible layer over the bottom of the large, beautiful plate meant for the steak. Then she did the same with the handles of the knives and forks lying nearby and lightly touched the rims of their glasses. The smell was revolting, but mixed with the aroma of smoke and grilled meat, it wasn't so noticeable. For now. At that moment, Betty came out of the house. Leslie managed to step back into the shadow of an old apple tree. Her heart was pounding. "Carl, where are you?" shouted her sister-in-law. "The meat's ready. Bring it here, let's finish our wonderful evening." Carl removed the remaining skewers and placed the meat on the prepared plate. The hot meat slightly melted the jelly, and the pungent fishy smell became a little stronger. But the men, heated by alcohol and argument, noticed nothing. They triumphantly carried the dish to the table. Leslie waited until they were seated and returned inside. She washed up, changed into a clean house dress, and stepped onto the veranda. She did it as if she were simply deciding to join the company. "Oh, she's arrived, dust-free," Betty sneered. "Finished your little cake? Decided to sit with us mere mortals after all?" "I decided to get some fresh air," Leslie replied calmly, sitting a little apart. Dave, seeing his wife, looked uneasy. "Leslie, don't be upset." "Well, it just happened." "Want some steaks?" "There's a little left." "No, thank you, I'm not hungry." At that moment, Betty took a fork to get a piece of meat and froze. What's that smell?" She brought the fork to her nose. "Carl, did you wash your hands?" "After lighting the grill, it smells like rot." "Smells fine to me," Carl mumbled, already spearing a big piece. "Smells like steaks. You must be going crazy from the fresh air." He put the meat in his mouth, but immediately grimaced. "Ugh, what is this?" He spat the piece onto the plate. "The salt is weird, bitter." Betty tried some too. Her face twisted. "It's not salt, it's some kind of filth. The meat's ruined." "Dave, try it." Dave cautiously took a small piece and chewed it. "No. It seems like normal meat. Just a strange aftertaste." But they couldn't eat it. The acrid, invisible yet all-pervading smell and the bitter aftertaste on the utensils made the food inedible. "What did you do?" Betty jumped up, staring at Leslie. Her eyes were flashing with anger. "It's you. You ruined everything for us." Leslie blinked innocently. "I've been sitting in the kitchen the whole time. I didn't even go near your grill. You put something in it. I know it. You decided to get revenge on us." She screeched. "Betty, you're being paranoid," Leslie replied calmly. "Maybe the meat wasn't fresh. Or the coals had some chemicals. The meat was perfect." Betty shouted. "It's you, witch. You poisoned everything." At that moment, the children came out of the house. Roger and Ashley, woken by the shouting, clung to each other in the doorway, frightened. "What's happening?" Dave asked, looking confusedly from his sister to his wife. The climax came when Betty grabbed the plate of steaks and brought it to her face. "Smell it!" she yelled. "You can't even feed this to dogs." And then everyone nearby distinctly caught that smell. The smell of cheap catfish food. It was disgusting. "My kids will eat the meat, and yours pasta," Leslie suddenly said loudly and clearly, mimicking Betty's intonation. She stood up, and her voice rang with steel. "That's what you said, Betty. Well, enjoy your special dinner. If you can, of course." Betty froze, holding the plate. Her face first went pale, then flushed red. She understood. Everyone understood. You. She hissed, and, finding no words, she threw the plate to the ground with a swing. Pieces of meat, mixed with dirt and grass, scattered all over the veranda. Dave watched all this with his mouth open. He couldn't believe that this quiet, meticulously planned hell had been orchestrated by his mild, non-confrontational wife. He looked at Leslie and saw in her calm, cold gaze something he had never seen before: power, contempt, and a final farewell. The celebration was over. The war had begun. After the plate of steaks shattered, a deafening silence fell over the veranda. All that could be heard was Betty's heavy breathing and Ashley's frightened sobs. Dave looked from the broken dishes to his wife, his face written with complete bewilderment. It was as if he was trying to reconcile two incompatible images: the picture of his quiet, domestic Leslie and this cold, determined woman who had just destroyed his sister with one precise move. You're crazy," Betty finally forced out. Her voice trembled with rage and humiliation. "You're insane. To ruin such good food." "I didn't ruin the food," Leslie replied evenly. "I just added a little seasoning. Apparently, it wasn't to your taste." She took her children by the hands. "Let's go inside, my dears. The show is over." She led them away, leaving destruction, confusion, and seething hatred on the veranda. Once inside, Leslie closed the door tightly. She didn't want to hear or see anything anymore. She sat the children on the couch and hugged them. It's all over," she whispered, stroking their heads. "No one will hurt you anymore." She felt completely drained, as if all her emotions had been sucked out, leaving only a ringing emptiness. She moved on autopilot, like a well-oiled machine, but she knew the mechanism would soon fail, and it would overwhelm her. Cries came from the veranda. Betty was blaming Leslie for everything. Dave muttered something in response. Carl was trying to calm them down. Leslie covered her ears with her hands. She turned on cartoons for the children on a tablet, turned up the volume to drown out the yelling. Then she went to the bedroom, the small one on the first floor that had been generously offered to her. She lay on the bed and curled up. And then it hit her. Tears poured from her eyes uncontrollably. These were not tears of hurt, but of a total, cosmic disappointment. She cried over her broken marriage, over a husband she once loved who turned out to be weak, spineless, and a traitor. She cried for her children, who had to witness this ugly conflict. She cried for herself, the naive girl who believed in family values, and love, and support. And who died today. She remembered how she and Dave had bought this dacha from her parents. Her parents had sold it for a symbolic sum, almost giving it away just so their daughter and grandchildren would have their own place to relax. "Just be happy," her mother had said then. Happy? How bitter and hollow that word seemed now. She replayed the events of recent years in her mind. All the small compromises, swallowed grievances, unspoken humiliations. She had always chosen peace. She thought it was the right thing, that it was how she preserved the family. It turned out that she had just been slowly destroying herself, letting others walk all over her. And today, when she finally fought back, the whole fake construct collapsed. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. The bedroom door opened slightly. It was Dave. "Leslie." He called quietly. "They're leaving." She didn't respond, just wrapped herself tighter in the blanket. He came in and sat on the edge of the bed. "Why did you do it?" There was no anger in his voice, just a kind of confused bitterness. "We could have just talked." She sat up sharply. "Talk?" Her voice was hoarse from crying. "I tried to talk to you, Dave. I asked you to stand up for our children. And what did you do? You told me to be wiser. You just stood there and watched your sister divide them into two kinds. What else were we supposed to talk about? But it was so humiliating. He shook his head. You made all of us look like idiots. And what she did wasn't humiliating. Leslie interrupted. She looked him straight in the eyes. That's exactly it. You didn't even understand. Yes. You still don't understand what happened. He stayed silent, lowering his head. Leave, Dave, she said wearily. Go, see your sister off, comfort her. Tell her I'm bad, crazy, ungrateful. Just like usual. He stood, paused for a moment as if he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words, and left. Leslie lay back down. She heard the car starting outside, the doors slamming loudly, the wheels crunching over gravel. They were gone. Silence fell over the dacha, but it brought no relief. It was heavy, oppressive, filled with pain and unspoken words. She lay there, thinking about what would come next. Divorce? Most likely. She could no longer live with this man. She saw him through and through, his weakness, his cowardice, his childish attachment to his sister. Love was dead. It had been killed tonight on the veranda and finished off with a coup de grace his incomprehension. She felt empty and alone, as if standing on a scorched battlefield after a terrible war. She had won this battle. But at what cost? The cost of her own family. That thought was unbearably painful. About an hour passed. Dave had not returned to the room. Leslie could hear him moving through the house, shifting things on the veranda, clattering dishes, probably cleaning up the aftermath of the battle. She lay there powerless, staring at the ceiling. No thoughts, just a dull, aching pain in her chest. At one point, she heard the gate creak and soft footsteps on the porch. Her heart tightened. Could it be Betty returning to continue the fight? The door opened quietly, and her mother, Gloria, appeared in the doorway. I came, as we agreed, she said softly, stepping into the room. Dave said, You're here? Her mother had brought cabbage pies and a thermos of rosehip tea. It was their little tradition. Seeing her daughter's tear-streaked face and the general atmosphere of ruin, she understood everything without words. She didn't ask questions, just sat next to Leslie on the bed, hugged her, and said, Well, tell me, daughter, what did that fury do? And Leslie told her. Sobbed, stumbled over words, but laid it all out, the humiliating division of food, Dave's betrayal, and her desperate, wicked revenge with cat food. She expected her mother, who had always taught her restraint and patience, to scold her, to say she shouldn't have acted that way, that she should have risen above it. But Gloria listened silently, her face growing increasingly stern. When Leslie finished, her mother thought for a long moment, then squeezed her daughter's hand firmly. You did the right thing, she said firmly. Leslie looked at her, surprised. But it was such childish meanness, she murmured quietly. Sometimes you have to fight evil with its own methods, her mother replied. You could have caused a scene, screamed, cried. And what? They would have called you hysterical, and your husband would have said to his sister, See, I told you, she's not in her right mind. But you responded quietly, coldly, and humiliatingly. You hit them where it hurt the most, at their arrogance, at their sense of superiority. Leslie stood and walked to the window. I've seen how they grew up. Dave and Betty. Their mother always favored Betty. She was the eldest, assertive, pushy. And Dave was always in the second role, quiet and obedient. He had been used to obeying her since childhood, and that habit stayed with him for life. He's not a bad person, Leslie. Just weak. But my children suffer because of that weakness. Mom, exactly. Leslie nodded. Gloria turned to her. And that's the one line you can't let anyone cross. You can tolerate a lot, barbs aimed at you, silly advice, passive aggression. But when someone starts humiliating your children, your patience ends. In that moment, a mother becomes a she-wolf. Today, you became that she-wolf, and I'm proud of you. Her mother's words were like balm for her soul. She didn't judge, she understood, she supported. What should I do now? Leslie asked. I told him it's over. And how do you feel? Her mother asked gently. I don't know. I don't love him anymore, but I'm scared. Alone, with 2 kids. The mortgage, the work. You're not alone, Gloria said firmly. You have me. We'll manage. You're a talented pastry chef, you have golden hands. We'll get through this. The most important thing now is not to falter. She poured hot tea from the thermos into a cup. Dave will come soon. He'll apologize, beg, promise that everything will change, because he's scared not for you, but for himself. For his comfortable little world, which you could destroy. And what should I say to him? The truth. What you feel. Tell him you need time, that you need to see deeds, not words. Let him prove he's a man, not just a shadow of his sister. At that moment, Dave actually walked into the room. Seeing his mother-in-law, he looked even more embarrassed. Gloria, hello. Hello, Dave, she replied dryly. I came to check on my daughter. Looks like it was fun over here. Dave lowered his eyes guiltily and approached Leslie. Leslie, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I behaved like a complete fool. I should have stood up for you. I don't know what came over me. It came over you from your sister, Dave, Leslie said calmly, echoing her mother's words. As always, I'll talk to her, he exclaimed eagerly. I'll tell her everything. I'll forbid her from interfering in our lives. You've said that many times before, Leslie said bitterly, smiling faintly. After every outburst, nothing changed. This time will be different. I promise. Leslie looked at her mother. She gave a slight nod. I need time, Dave, Leslie said. I can't just pretend nothing happened. You betrayed not only me but our children. They saw everything, and they won't forget it just like me. What can I do to make you forgive me? His voice full of desperation. I don't know, she answered honestly. I really don't know. Maybe nothing. Or maybe you'll have to earn our trust again. Not with promises, but with actions. She stood up. And right now, I want you to leave. Where? This is my dacha. Gently, but firmly, she corrected. And I want to stay here with my mom and the kids. Alone. Please, Dave, leave. He looked at her for a few seconds, then silently nodded, turned, and walked out. Leslie heard his car start and drive away. She sat on the bed and exhaled deeply. The first round was hers, but she knew it was only the beginning of a long, difficult journey. A journey to herself, to a new life where there would be no place for humiliation and compromises with conscience. She looked at her mother, who smiled encouragingly. She wasn't alone, and that was what mattered most. In the morning, Leslie woke to the smell of suniki. Her mother was already bustling in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window, the children slept peacefully. For a moment, it seemed as if yesterday's nightmare had been just a bad dream. But the dull ache in her chest reminded her, this was reality. After breakfast, she and her mother sat on the veranda. The traces of yesterday's feast had been cleared. Dave had apparently tidied up before leaving. He called, Gloria said, stirring her tea. Early this morning, asking how you are. And what did you tell him? I said you're recovering and that it's better for him not to show up for now. Leslie nodded. She was grateful to her mother for her tact. She really didn't want to see anyone right now, especially Dave. She needed to sort herself out. She took out her work tablet, a wedding cake. The client was waiting for a sketch of blue fondant roses. Leslie opened the program and suddenly felt that she could work. Her fingers confidently moved across the screen, blending shades, creating delicate petals. Creativity returned because fear had left her soul. Around noon, just as she had finished her sketch and sent it to the client, a message from Dave arrived on her phone. It was long and rambling. He wrote that he had spoken to Betty, that they had a terrible fight, and that he had shouted at her for the first time in his life. He wrote that he had forbidden her from approaching their family. He wrote that he loved Leslie and the children more than anything in the world and was willing to do anything to get them back. Leslie read these words, and her heart was silent. She no longer believed him. The words had become just a collection of letters to her. She needed proof. And the answer came unexpectedly. An hour later, her phone rang from an unknown number. Leslie Cooper? A pleasant female voice asked. Yes, that's me. Hello, my name is Gwen. I am Carl Wright's wife. Leslie froze. Carl's wife. Or rather, as she understood, his ex-wife. Sorry, I'm not quite. Don't be surprised, the woman on the line chuckled. Your performance at the dacha yesterday had consequences. I'm filing for divorce. Leslie didn't know what to say. Listen, I didn't want to destroy your family. You didn't destroy it, Gwen interrupted. You saved it. Or rather, you saved me. I had been putting up with that couple Betty and her spineless little brother for many years. Yesterday was the last straw. When Carl came back and started talking about what an inadequate hysteric you are, and how Betty is the victim, I just packed his things and showed him the door. Leslie listened, her mouth agape. He's with her now, Gwen continued. Apparently, at your mother-in-law's, they're healing each other's emotional wounds. I called you, first of all, to say thank you. You gave me courage, and second to warn you. Be careful. Betty will not forgive you for this. She is vindictive and very nasty. Thank you for calling, Leslie managed to say. Good luck, Gwen said. People like us will be needed. After that call, Leslie felt a strange surge of strength. She was not alone. Somewhere out there was another woman who had also said, enough. She stood up resolutely. Mom, I need to go to the city. Why? For our things. Mine and the children's. And I also need to get my work tools, the mixer, the baking molds. I can't depend on his mercy anymore. Gloria nodded. I'll go with you. They arrived at the city apartment by evening. Dave wasn't home. Leslie used her key to open the door. The apartment was quiet and somehow uncomfortable. She quickly went to the children's room and started packing their things into large bags. Her mother helped her. When they were almost done, the key turned in the lock. Dave entered. Seeing his wife and mother-in-law with bags, he understood everything. You're leaving? He asked quietly. I'm taking our things, Leslie corrected him. We'll stay at the dacha for now. But I wrote to you I broke up with Betty. That's not enough, Dave. She walked to the kitchen and began packing her planetary mixer. It had cost a fortune. She had been saving for it for almost a year. Leslie, don't do this. He stood in the doorway, blocking her path. Let's talk. We already talked. You said everything yesterday, while you were silent. I was wrong. I was scared. He almost shouted. But I realized everything. I'm glad for you. She tried to pass him, but he didn't let her. Please. He took her hands. Tears stood in his eyes. Don't leave. I can't live without you. At that moment, Leslie looked at him and felt nothing. No pity, no love. Only exhaustion. Let me go, she said. Her mother stepped out of the room. Dave, let her pass, she said in her calm, teacherly voice that brooked no argument. The girl made her decision. Respect him. He stepped back. Leslie took the box with the mixer and walked toward the exit. She stopped at the very door. "You know, Dave," she said without turning around, "I might have been able to forgive you, but I will never forgive you for letting our children be humiliated. Goodbye." She left, and her mother closed the door behind her. They rode the elevator down in complete silence. Leslie held the box with her mixer to her chest like her greatest treasure. It wasn't just a kitchen appliance. It was a symbol of her independence, her new life that she would now build herself, without him, without his sister, without their special rules. Summer at the dacha flew by in a flash. Leslie immersed herself in work and caring for the children. She moved all her confectionery equipment, and now the small dacha kitchen had become a true creative laboratory. Orders came in, surprisingly many. Word of mouth worked better than any advertisement. Her wedding cake with blue roses caused a sensation, and now there was a line of clients waiting for her. The children blossomed. They spent entire days outside, building forts, swimming in the river, helping their grandmother in the garden. Roger became cheerful and open again, and Ashley stopped being afraid of loud voices. The humiliating incident with the steaks gradually faded, replaced by new happy memories. Dave called from time to time. At first, he begged, then demanded, then threatened that he would go to court and take the children, that he would prove she was a bad mother because she lived with them in a shed without comforts. Leslie calmly replied that the shed had everything necessary, and most importantly a healthy atmosphere, and then hung up. The climax came at the end of August. One day, a car arrived at the dacha. Dave and Betty got out. Leslie saw them through the window and braced herself internally. Her mother, watering flowers in the flower bed, also noticed them and straightened up. "Leslie," Dave shouted from the doorway. "Come out, we need to talk." Leslie went out onto the porch. Her mother stood beside her. "What do you want?" Leslie asked calmly. "We came to take the children," Betty announced, stepping forward. She looked thinner and angry. The divorce from Carl clearly hadn't done her any favors. "We have a decision from the Guardianship Council." Leslie held out a piece of paper. Leslie took it. It really was some kind of conclusion stating that the children's living conditions at the dacha did not meet the standards, and it was recommended that their father take them to the city apartment. "What is this worthless piece of paper?" Gloria intervened, peering over her daughter's shoulder. "There's no stamp, no signature from the commission chair. It's just a sheet of paper. It's an official document," Betty squealed. "They gave it to us. Dave, as their father, has the right to see his children. He has the right to meet with them according to a court decision which doesn't exist yet," Leslie cut in. "Until then, they will live with me." "We'll call the police," Betty threatened. "Call them," Leslie shrugged. "And explain to them why you're trespassing on private property." Betty faltered. She had apparently forgotten that the dacha belonged to Leslie. "Dave, tell her." She turned to her brother. Dave remained silent, looking at his ex-wife. "Leslie," he began plaintively, "you have to understand, I miss them. Let me take them for at least the weekend. After you threatened to take them from me forever," Leslie smirked. "No, Dave, all meetings will go through the court." "Oh really?" Betty exploded again. "So, you just don't want to do it the easy way? Fine, don't blame me." She took out her phone and started calling someone, loudly shouting into the receiver. "Hello, this is Guardianship? I'm Betty Wright, aunt of minor Roger Cooper and Ashley. Their mother, Leslie Cooper, is keeping them in unsanitary conditions at the dacha. The children are starving, they are neglected. Come immediately." Gloria listened to this nonsense with a stone-cold face. When Betty finished, she stepped forward. "Miss," she said in an icy tone, "aren't you afraid of being charged with slander and false reporting?" Betty laughed brazenly. "Prove it," she said. At that moment, the sound of an approaching car came from the road. But it wasn't the police. A large black SUV pulled up to the gate, and an elegant, well-groomed woman in her 50s stepped out. "Hello, Leslie." She smiled warmly. "I hope I'm not too early for the cake." It was the same client who had ordered the wedding cake. "Wendy," Leslie gasped. "Please, come in, I'll bring it out right now." The woman entered the yard, glancing curiously at the uninvited guests. "Are you having a family celebration?" she asked skeptically. "Almost," Leslie nodded. "Meet my ex-husband and his sister. They came to check on the children." Wendy gave Betty and Dave a sharp, assessing look. "How nice," she said. "Leslie, dear, your cake was simply a masterpiece." All the guests were delighted. "I've recommended you to all my friends. You probably have no shortage of orders now." Betty listened, her face slowly stretching into disbelief. A successful, well-dressed woman praising Leslie and her work didn't fit into her worldview, where Leslie was supposed to be a poor, pitiful failure. "Yes, thank you," Leslie said, embarrassed. "There are indeed many orders." "I'm not surprised," Wendy exclaimed. "You have a God-given talent, and your place here is wonderful. So cozy, so homey. The children must be happy here." She noticed Roger and Ashley coming onto the porch and smiled at them. "What lovely children you have. In what unsanitary conditions do they live here?" Betty shouted. "In this dump." Wendy raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Excuse me, do we know each other?" she asked coldly. "And why do you allow yourself to speak about Leslie's home in such a tone?" "I think it's a charming place, a true family nest, unlike those soulless cottages." Betty choked on her words. Being contradicted by someone from her own social circle was terrifying for her. She shot Leslie a look full of hatred, grabbed Dave's hand, and dragged him to the car. "Let's get out of here," she hissed. "It's useless to talk to them." They left as quickly as they had appeared. Wendy watched them go. "Relatives?" she asked sympathetically. "Exes," Leslie sighed. "I understand," the woman nodded. "I have an ex like that too." "Well, all the better for you. You've rid yourself of ballast. Now let's get to my masterpiece." When Leslie brought out the cake, Wendy gasped. "Oh my God, how beautiful." She took an envelope from her purse. "This is for you. There's a little more than we agreed on. Consider it a bonus for moral damage." She winked, got into her SUV, and drove away. Leslie opened the envelope. Inside was an amount twice the price of the order. She looked at the money, then at her mother and children, and laughed. It was a laugh of relief and triumph. She hadn't just endured, she had won. A year passed on her own terms, on her own territory. The first autumn chill forced Leslie to close the dacha season and return to the city. But this was no longer an escape, it was a planned relocation. Over the summer, she had not only earned enough money to feel confident, but had also made the final decision to divorce. The court proceedings went surprisingly smoothly. Dave, broken by the breakup with his sister after that incident, she hardly communicated with him, blaming him for his weakness and by his failure with the guardianship council, didn't attend the hearing. He agreed to all of Leslie's conditions. The apartment remained hers and the children's. He moved out and paid alimony. The alimony was small since he never found steady work. But for Leslie, that no longer mattered. She stood firmly on her own 2 feet. She sold their former mortgaged apartment and bought another, smaller but in a good neighborhood, near the school Roger and Ashley now attended. The remaining money she invested in the growth of her business. Now she had a small but cozy pastry studio, where she not only baked custom cakes but also held workshops for children and adults. Her life had found new meaning and a new sense of harmony. She worked a lot, but this work brought her joy. She saw how happy her children were, how proud her mother was of her. She had made new friends among her clients and students. One day, while picking up the children from school, she saw Betty. She was standing by the gate, waiting for her own children. She looked ordinary. There was no longer any ostentatious luxury or arrogance in her, just a simple woman in an inexpensive coat with a tired face. She saw Leslie. For a moment, fear flickered in her eyes, and she quickly looked away. Leslie walked past, feeling neither anger nor triumph, only a slight sadness. Everyone gets what they deserve. Betty wanted to be special, but in her pursuit of status, she lost everything: family, respect, and herself. In the evening, putting the children to bed, Leslie read them a story. Ashley was already falling asleep when Roger suddenly asked, "Mom, will Dad come see us again?" Leslie set the book aside. She knew this question would come sooner or later. "If you want to see him, we can arrange it," she said gently. Roger thought for a moment. "I don't know. He was really bad back then, and now I don't know what he's like. People change sometimes for the better, sometimes not. But he will always be your dad." It was an honest answer. She didn't want to turn the children against their father. She wanted them to grow up without hatred in their hearts. When the children were asleep, she went to the kitchen and brewed her favorite time tea. Snow was falling outside. She watched it and reflected on how long a journey she had traveled over the past year, from a timid, insecure woman, afraid to speak a word to her husband's sister, to the mistress of her own life. She remembered the humiliating day at the dacha and realized she was grateful to him. He had become her point of no return, the push she so desperately needed. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to push off and soar. The phone on the table buzzed. It was a message from a new acquaintance she had met at business courses. "Leslie, hi. I have an idea for a joint project, a cafe pastry shop. You as head pastry chef, me as manager. Think about it." Leslie smiled. New horizons were opening ahead. A new life, full of new opportunities, new encounters, and, of course, new delicious cakes. She took a sip of her hot tea. For the first time in many years, she felt truly happy, calm, and free.